Welcome to Overcoming Physician Burnout as Health Architects, a series in which we talk about different ways that physicians can approach their clinical work to make it more rewarding and fulfilling. This is Venkatesh Ramnath. Today is episode 20, a conversation with a family medicine physician about her journey through burnout. Dr. Rachel Bennett was a college government major who never considered a career in medicine until she was 24 years old and was in the Peace Corps in Thailand. She later graduated from the Mayo Clinic Alix School of Medicine in the year 2000 and did an internship in obstetrics and gynecology at Baylor University Medical Center in Dallas before she finished a family medicine residency at Baylor in Garland, Texas. She practiced family medicine at Baylor in Richardson, Texas, and Scott and White in Temple, Texas, for several years before starting at UWHealth in Madison, Wisconsin in 2011, where she won awards for patient care and teaching. After leaving UWHealth in 2021, she was the first physician at a telemedicine startup for 2.5 years until it closed in August 2024. She's now taking the time to consider her future, exploring how her commitment to care and community might unfold next. Okay, so I'm here with Rachel Bennett. Thanks for joining us, Rachel.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about, first, your background. Tell us a bit about yourself and how you even got to medical school, what excited you, and ultimately, what practice did you join?
Yeah, well, I didn't take a traditional path. I would say that growing up, I really had no interest in science or medicine to speak of. I was a government major in college, and then I worked at the World Bank for a year and then went in the Peace Corps. And it was actually when I was there that I kind of changed gears. I had assumed my whole life, I think, that I would work abroad. Maybe I think I had this childhood dream of being an ambassador or working in the Foreign Service or something like that. And then when I actually was in the Peace Corps and I saw...
Oh, and tell us, Rachel, where were you in the Peace Corps?
Oh, I was in Thailand. Sorry.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I looked around at the adults who were older than I am who had followed that path, and I just realized, what? Maybe I don't want to live abroad. Maybe I want to go back and build my community in the United States and have something to offer. And so then I started thinking about, what do I have to offer? And it kind of around that time, I took a 10-day massage course at a famous temple in Bangkok. And it was a really good course. And it was the first time I had ever experienced any kind of therapeutic touch. Sounds kind of goofy, but it felt really amazing and it was eye-opening. And it made me think, okay, maybe I could do this. I actually wasn't a very good massage therapist, I don't think, but it kind of led me to think about applying to med school, and then I went home to Ohio and took my pre-med courses and then went to med school.
That's really fascinating. I mean, really, nobody has a traditional, I would say, I don't even know what traditional would be, right? But, sort of marrying the science and the art, and in your sphere, it was the touch. There's the human touch sounds like a leading focus for you. How did you get to incorporating science into that? Was there a deeper side to the massage therapy world that also kind of came out in that?
I think it was more practical. I realized that I was going to be bored as a massage therapist. And like I said, I wasn't so good. I think my hands are kind of small. I don't know, just didn't seem like a good fit. So I started thinking, well, what other careers would incorporate that? And so I initially thought, okay, well, maybe I'll apply to nursing school. And then I started thinking, well, if I do that, maybe I could even apply to medical school and then maybe I'll get in. And I just took that chance. I think that's how that happened. And I think, I like how you say the marriage of art and science, because we're on a continuum of our interest in both of those things. And I'm heavy on the art, and I use the science as a way to offer something to patients to try to make themselves their lives better. So I think for me, science was a means to an end.
Yeah, that is interesting. And in my own Substack, I do emphasize the scientific attitude and how that's a sort of core foundational point, but it is closely associated with this other side, right? And I describe it as the ethical side, but it's also the humanistic side. It obviously involves a lot of the art of life and our work. So thanks for sharing that. Now let's fast forward now. You finished your training, and then tell us about the practice that you joined.
Well, first, I would say that I was always aiming for primary care. I think I went into medical school assuming and thinking I'd be a family doctor. It seemed to fit myself best. But then I got a little bit derailed in third year of med school because I just did a lot better in my OB course than than my internal medicine course, and I lost confidence. Honestly, I thought, oh, family medicine is so broad. How could I ever learn it? And then I did my OB-GYN rotation, and it seemed so narrow, and I did great at it. And I thought, well, clearly this is what I was meant to do. It's also primary care-ish, I thought. But then after halfway through my internship in OB-GYN, I realized that actually, no, it's really a surgical specialty and not too primary care-ish at all. And I switched gears into family medicine, which was a much better fit for me. And yeah, what I should have done all along. So I graduated from residency in Dallas, worked for probably a total of 5 years, a couple years in Dallas, and then 3 years or so, maybe 4 years in Scott and White in Temple, Texas, and then moved to Wisconsin, really for my husband's career.
Right, and it sounds like not only is that a meandering path in terms of your career choice, but also geographically, right? And one of the themes that I've certainly learned in my own path is that it's just not that concrete. It changes, it swerves, it curves, it dips, it rises. I mean, it's all over the place, right? And so that's interesting that you also had that and you felt that both from the discipline that you chose, but also where you practiced. So let's now move to the moment that you realized that something was off. It sounds like you had arrived to family practice in a certain context, but then there's something missing, and there was an impasse that you felt. And so, can you describe that and what happened?
I think so. It was very gradual. I was very convinced that I was really happy in my practice. And I think I was. I practiced at University of Wisconsin in Madison, and the institution is great. They do great science. They have a great administration. I joined a suburban practice with one other physician who was amazing. So it was just a really good fit. I had a great population of patients, very diverse. I just had a great staff. Like everything was good, I would say. And then later, closer to 2020, there were some administrative changes that affected our staffing. They affected my teaching of medical students, which was it was a big satisfier for me. I love teaching medical students, and our curriculum changed so that I did a lot less teaching. Our staffing changed. And then there were just things in the medical landscape that were changing as well.
Can you give some specifics?
Sure. I don't remember this being an issue when I started practicing, but by the end, I felt that there were a lot of patients struggling with anxiety and depression, and that was affecting so many physical things. Like, for example, there were a lot of people coming to me for ADHD meds as adults, and that was a hard thing to navigate as a primary care. There's no really clear way to diagnose adult ADHD, I felt, and I felt like a lot of responsibility with that. And then, people coming for weight loss drugs, for opioids, for testosterone replacement, a lot of those things that are important, but yet those things became a larger chunk of my practice. That, along with some staffing changes in the clinic, medical school teaching, and then COVID hit.
And what changed during COVID?
Well, during COVID, my clinic actually was closed and we were incorporated into a different clinic. So we lost our staff and suddenly, for about 2 years there, we practiced in a different clinic. So very much felt, I don't know, a little bit estranged, right? We lost that sense of team. Um, and then some personal things happened too. My husband's job got really, really busy. My kids, of course, like probably everybody's kids, were really stressed. So there was a lot more demands on my time at the same time that work was less satisfying. And really, we came to a crunch time where something had to give in our family. Someone needed to like be there to support each other, and it just made sense for me to step back.
Right. And it sounds like, I mean, obviously, there's always a balance between the personal and the professional,
Mhm.
and you face that head on. Can you tell us a little bit more about the team feel? You emphasized how the team structure gave you value and that somehow that got fractured during COVID. What was working before that now wasn't there, and what could not be recovered?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's really two things going on. One is specific to our clinic, which is that we had a really good team of registered nurses who knew all our patients. And then maybe a couple years before COVID, there were some administrative changes at UW that indirectly or directly led to them leaving. Since that time, RNs were often floats, or they were just new and they didn't know the patients. And we kind of really just lost a sense of team at that point. And then there was also, on a broader scale across the country, there was a lack of medical assistants. So there was just a shortage essentially. And we were hiring floats. So like every day our team could look different depending on like which float nurse or float MA traveled from somewhere else to help us. So just, yeah, it felt like I still had my team of physicians and advanced practice practitioners, but the support staff was very variable.
Right. And did the administration recognize that interpersonal glue was missing? And if so, did they try to fill it in different ways, or did you and your team of physicians take a lead in some of that, or how did that play out, or did it just fall apart?
That's a great question. I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I feel maybe I had an idyllic vision of a medical office where somebody might go for 20 years and the nurse knows their name. Because, I don't know if that's too idealistic. But it was certainly a goal for me that the staff and we and the patients are all kind of familiar with each other. I think probably the administration would like that as well, but other considerations have to take precedence for financial reasons, for, you know, other reasons. So the answer is I don't know.
Yeah. In my case, I felt the same thing. I mean, during COVID, especially, and obviously it resonated across the country and including where you were. But the staff of nurses was now given opportunities and flexibility to really just go anywhere. And it definitely fractured our sense of community as well. And it was a pretty heady time for trying to incorporate and restore trust within our teams when we just have met each other, and try to aspire to standards that kind of change from one place to another in a large degree, especially when nobody really knew exactly how to make COVID just go away, right?
Right.
And so that was definitely a tough time in the ICU world, where I
I
was as well.
I bet the stress level in the ICU is just like even so much higher, and you really need a lot of trust. And you probably need a sense of comfort with each other and humor to get through it. And it helps if you all know each other, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. And there were times where we didn't even have the physician staffing to be able to oversee some of things like cardiac arrest, resuscitation efforts. And so the
Oh,
nurses got so adept to really just doing things in some cases, not always, but by themselves, that the whole idea of team became kind of fragmented, So certainly that affected us, but it sounds like it affected you as well. Were there other aspects to your experience in family practice at that point that detracted from your earlier happiness? The team aspect was obviously one, but were there certain, I don't know, ways that you viewed the job yourself or what you brought to from a personality or just mindset standpoint that might have been under more stress or strain during that time?
Thank you so much for asking that. I think that's something that doesn't get asked a lot. And I've been thinking about my own personality. I'm quite a perfectionist. Well, I'll give you an example. I wrote my medical notes such that they were quite thorough, and I wanted my partners to be able to read them and fully understand what was going on with the patient should they have to cover for me. So I think I spent too much time on that in retrospect, but I had a really hard time making them shorter and less detailed. That wasn't a huge problem, but it became a problem because it made me spend a lot more time at work probably than I needed to. And I had a hard time stepping back. My administration was awesome. They actually offered us scribes, virtual scribes. So a scribe maybe, in a different state, listening in on our visit and writing the notes. It didn't really work for me because I didn't think their notes were to my satisfaction. So, I think I could have done better with that. We joked, my colleagues and I joked about how hard it is to work in primary care or really any high volume ambulatory care practice for a long time and do A plus work. It's just something's got to give. Either you're going to go crazy or something. So really the way to keep in it without making yourself miserable is to do B plus work. And I had a hard time with that. So yeah, my perfectionistic tendencies are something that probably made it hard. That also what I think is what gave me satisfaction and made me good. I really listened to my patients. I was taught to be a good listener. That's what I enjoy about the job. And to be really productive, I think you need to spend a shorter amount of time with patients and leave some of their questions unanswered and maybe leave some of them unsatisfied with the visit potentially. And I just wasn't really willing to do that. So there was always that tension that made every day a bit stressful.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the challenge that we have, right? We have this sort of agent arena relationship that is bidirectional. We bring certain things to the arena, and the arena imprints itself on us, and there's this constant dynamic that happens. And you're not alone to be perfectionistic. I mean, I think most of us, if not all of us, have to be perfectionistic just to get into medical school, right?
Right.
And we have all these different facets that we have to achieve and be overachievers. And then all of a sudden, that just doesn't go away overnight, especially when you're dealing with people's lives. I completely empathize with that feeling, and there are many ways that I'm perfectionistic as well. Do you think that we set ourselves up for failure just as a medical education infrastructure?
That's such a good question. I wonder about that. I wonder if the qualities that medical schools are screening for when they accept students are really the qualities that will make a successful physician. I think it's worth pondering. My impression of my medical school interviews is they were definitely screening for empathy. They wanted students who were very caring towards others. And they also wanted good scientists, of course, highly productive people. But I think by screening for students who really do want to not rush patients and really listen, I think maybe it's not a good fit. Or maybe it would be the admission process is actually okay, but maybe in medical school, maybe if we were taught, yes, you should listen, but this is also a long-term career. You need to pace yourself. You need to take everything we say with a little bit of, grain of salt and listen, but not listen too much,
I think that you're right with the interviews as sort of I would say, a part of the evaluation process that comes later on, right? I mean, you already have gone through a certain type of screening, and often that includes your pre-med courses and all your achievements, all your objective achievements in a sort of traditional model, right? And then you get to an interview, which is much more organic and dynamic and relational, right? And that's where I agree with you that it's sort of lopsided in the sense of your communication ability, and it doesn't really emphasize other parts of what might be necessary in the workplace once you've finished all the training. What do you think has been missing in that? Like, if you were going to be an interviewer, let's say, for new medical students, what would you ask those medical students about?
I think I might ask them interests or personality traits that define who they are.
Right.
And I would ask them to really think about those interests and how they're going to apply that to their career. I realize they're very variable. Like for me, and it's taken me to get to middle age to realize this, but my core interest is listening to other people's stories. Like that is it, My husband's core interest is, I would say, science. If I had a mentor at that time, if I could go back, I would want them to say, Rachel, that's great. You're going to be a very empathic listener in your practice, but there are parameters in medicine that need to be met the way we practice it now. And you need to figure out how to balance that. And I think what that would have meant for me is I would have been early on starting to write less good notes and maybe taking the interview process shorter.
I agree that there's a experiential part to this that has two sides. One of them is emotional, but the other is practical, right? So personally, I would ask, if I were the interviewer, I would say, yes, let's talk about your ability to communicate and connect empathically, but also what's your view of the practical side of being a physician? Like, how do you view the boring stuff, right? And depending on what you bring into this, like maybe science is the boring stuff, or maybe it's the most exciting stuff. But what about the operational stuff? Around getting patients from point A to point B. What about the coding and billing? The absolute need to make financial viability of wherever you're working actually happen, right? How do you understand the structures of networks, whether they're insurance networks or just places where patients can get care, whether it's a skilled nursing facility or a hospital? What's your understanding of that, and what are the sides of medicine that aren't so appealing, and how do you view that, and how do you think that that's going to be incorporated once you finish training and have to do it on a daily basis?
Oh, Venkatesh, that is so well put. That's exactly what I was trying to say. And yes, it would have been great if I could have thought about all that early on and then also planned for it. If somebody also added the question, what are your plans for when medicine isn't as fun or seems overwhelming or just seems like something you can't do anymore? What are the potential changes you could make? And what can you do now to plan for that eventuality? And the answer to that might be, oh, well, maybe I'll do more administration in my department. So maybe I could ramp that up if the patient care becomes too overwhelming. Or maybe I'll become involved in organized medicine. Or maybe I'll do a fellowship in some kind of specialty so that I, can change my practice up. Just thinking ahead about that, I think would have helped me.
Yeah, and just to extend that a little bit is maybe inquiring about two different sides of the empathic connection. One is to the individual, him or herself, right? But then it's also to what the societal factors that are putting that person in that position. So I think you even mentioned to me at what point that unhappiness trickles down to the PCP. That was something that spoke to me.
I think I said PCP and teachers.
and teachers. Yes. Thanks for the correction, because you're absolutely right. But it is something that, we are the recipient of, and primary care physicians in the medical fields, probably more than anybody. And so how do you actually handle that, right? How do you handle this societal ill and feel that weight on your shoulders? How do you actually approach that, and not just what's happening in the individual sort of isolated doctor-patient relationship. The other part of it is, how do you look to incorporate whatever you're doing and wanting to do into a longitudinal explorative journey, right? Just like what you yourself have brought before medical school, right? We have all these divergent paths, including, Rachel, you shared how you were in Thailand doing work that ultimately led you to medical school, but then your path, ebbed and flowed in different ways. And how do you see that playing out in the future? What's your conception of that? Would be probably more useful than just isolating the conversation to how do you talk to a patient, or
That's right.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Can I just add one thing to that, which I
Sure.
think might be like the elephant in the room, is that I'm a woman. I'm a married woman with 2 children.
Yes.
So
Yes.
every couple in medicine, or every couple anywhere, has to figure out the balance between who's going to focus on their career, whereas who's going to be made more available for child emergencies, who's going to take care of those children. So in our case, I've always worked part-time. So I've always been split between family and work responsibilities. And I would be remiss to say if that certainly didn't affect my choices, right? Maybe I would have done a fellowship. Maybe I would have had more, gone into organized medicine a bit or done more administration if I felt like I had that extra capacity. But I was pretty busy already, obviously.
Yeah, no, totally. Balancing, I mean, we talk about balance between professional and personal, but there's a book that I've been reading called The Resilient Practitioner. It's really focused on the counseling professions. It's by Schofield and Trotter Matheson. But what they really talk about, and I think it applies to our fields and traditional medicine fields, is that they focus on self-care in parallel and in real time along with professional care. They make the point that in the healing professions, we are so focused on caring for others that we don't really focus on ourselves, and not in some sort of selfish, self-serving way. But the idea is that if we don't care for ourselves, and they go through what the aspects of that are, whether it's the physical self, the financial self, the nurturing self, the priority setting self, they go through all these different selves. But if you don't focus on those selves in coordination and alongside your professional care for others, you won't be able to actually do that care for others very well. And so what you're talking about is absolutely essential. Is part of that self-care is knowing, how do I deal with and approach my own needs and my own family's needs, because they're part of me. And if I can't serve that, and if I can't get fulfillment from that, I'm not going to be able to be that caring practitioner and professional in the workplace. So I don't know if that
That sounds
resonates with you.
very much so. I wish I had that book. I think it might have helped. It sounds excellent.
Well, it's there. It's like the 4th edition. So it's there's definitely more and more coming.
And if I could add one other thing to that, is just recognizing that that we all change. We all change all the time. So we're not the person we were 10 years ago. If we're suddenly not satisfied at the time, doing something that we did in the past, that's okay. It's, we're changing creatures, and we just have to respect and honor that as well.
Right. Oh, totally. And that is where I've also found the distinction between moral injury and burnout. I think a lot of the discussion, and there's definitely a relationship between the two, but the focus on moral injury, in my opinion, limits us a bit, because it focuses on the non-dynamic. It focuses on it being a static sort of standoff between us and the system. And we're wronged, and until the system actually changes something, we can't do anything. Whereas I think burnout, and this has been described even going back to Freudenberger, back in the 1970s, is that it's an opportunity to monitor ourselves as part of our natural homeostasis, meaning we're always in change, we're always in flux. And feeling burnout is just it's a bellwether for us in our own movement through this agent-to-agent relationship we call life and the world. So can we use this as a creative spark, and not just an endpoint of doom to impel ourselves forward. And how do we do that? Well, like you said very nicely, is that we're changing. And so why can't we use this as an opportunity to change even more? Because we're constantly changing. Even if we don't want to change, we are changing, right? And like you said, it's things that we liked before, we may not like even today or tomorrow. And yet we're still trapped in many ways by the way we were and the ways of being we had during residency and training, where we just don't think there are many options out there. We think of this in some sort of monolithic, endpoint where the whole focus was to become an attending, right? You become a medical student, then you could become an intern. Okay, then what? Then you have to be a resident. Okay, then what? Then you got to be a fellow. Well, why are we doing all this? So that we can become an attending when it's all going to get better, right? And then we become attendings. And some things are better, but other things are not better, just like it was all along the way. And yet we forget that we have agency around how we take this part on, right? And moving that longitudinally and thinking about that, not in the short term only, but the long term. I think that's part of the challenge. Have you thought about certain types of longevity factors that maybe came across to you in your own path, and maybe even your peers, like people that I know you and I are coming on our 25th medical school reunion time. This is our year. And I'm curious if you've had conversations with others in terms of what has allowed people to flourish today and tomorrow, and what longevity factors might be.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've really been asking other physicians about that in order to try to make a list of factors. And again, I think the ability to pivot, but the ability meaning the desire to pivot and change your job a little bit, the capacity at home to make that change, the permission from your institution to make that change, all those things help a lot. The people I know who are doing well and flourishing in the second half of their career often have something on the side so they don't do their primary job 5 full days a week. So like I said, they might do organized medicine or be in administration or do some research or have changed a little bit and done an extra fellowship. I have one friend who was burnt out as an outpatient internal medicine physician, and then I think probably when she was about 50 years old, did a addiction medicine fellowship, and now is working in addiction medicine at the VA, and she's really happy. So I think the ability to imagine and then make a change like that is helpful. I will also add, and something that is not considered very often, my husband was really burnt out.
And I'm sorry, what's his field? Could you just share?
I'm sorry, my husband's a dermatopathologist and has been highly, highly involved in organized medicine, and just had a period of time where he was doing so much that he wore himself down, I would say. And he just felt he needed a big change. And his chair gave him permission to take a 3-month sabbatical, which is really not something we do in medicine. It's not part of our usual trajectory, but it's made a big difference for him. Just being able to step away, think about his profession, think about his role in it and what changes he wants to make. And so that's something maybe we should consider a little bit if possible.
Yeah, like even just asking, right?
And just asking, or if someone asks and they say, "Hey, I'm really burnt out. I think this would help." Maybe to consider that. We think we're indispensable, but as we know from physicians on maternity leave, like things move, things happen when someone's gone for a while. It's not a problem. It can be done.
Right, life happens, right?
Life happens. Yes, the world.
Well, speaking of life happening and pivoting, you did your own pivot. Can you tell us about your second career?
Yes. So I stopped being a primary care physician in 2021, and then I really just took 6 months to take care of the house. And I suspect a lot of us have had delayed maintenance in our house or wherever we live, and just wanted to catch up on those things, take care of the family. And then a job fell into my lap, actually. I have a friend who started a startup and invited me to be the first physician in the startup. And what it was a telemedicine clinic focused on hypertension. The founders of the startup saw the need Hypertension is undertreated. Certainly, it's very important. And then with the proliferation of telemedicine during COVID, they said, aha, this is a really good idea. And it was. So I was a physician there for 2.5 years until the startup lost venture capital funding in August of 2024. And I have not worked since. I'm kind of figuring out what I want to do next.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What excited you about the position, and what ultimately led you to leave?
First of all, it was a wonderful job. I just have to say that. The excitement was, I would say there was two big parts. Number one, I worked with colleagues who were not physicians. They were computer engineers and entrepreneurs and pharmacists, and they were just so smart and so interesting. And that was just fun. It was just fun to be working with a group of really motivated people who are building something. So I love that. Really challenged me, and I learned a lot. And then the second thing is just going back to the joy of medicine and helping people. We really helped people. There were a lot of people in this country who want to treat their blood pressure, but due to financial or access barriers cannot. And we broke those barriers down, and we were treating hypertension really well and at a low cost. So that was really joyful. And my patients were very diverse, and I loved them. The reason I lost enthusiasm, I think, over time is that in order to make the clinic financially viable, we needed to start partnering with insurance. And it's kind of complicated, but in essence, we needed to see patients who were more and more complex. And I grew uncomfortable with that. I think for complex patients, they really need in-person care a lot of the time. And I felt in some ways that I was getting in between the care of them and their doctor, or else being their primary physician when really it wasn't appropriate. They needed someone in their community to assess them. So yeah, I was worried about that. And it really came down to the fact that the clinic needed to develop profit, to make profits. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so what I'm hearing from you is two things. One is that you created a team. You felt that sense of connection, now not with necessarily all medical professionals, but with people who are adjacent or within the medical industry itself, right? And you're able to feel that and be part of something. I mean, that's incredibly motivating. I can just imagine. But then at the same time, there's the reality of the workplace and our economy and everything else, where there are different needs that have to be achieved just to keep the lights on, right? And so those things are the push-pull that, whether you're in the clinical world directly, like in a hospital or a clinic, or you're in an industry that serves that doctor-patient relationship, I think these are the kinds of stresses that we all feel, right? So that's at least what I'm hearing from you, and it's very meaningful, because yes, it applies to anything that we're doing.
It really does. And I think I had too much idealism. My whole career, I probably was too idealistic, wanting to do the best for the patient and not fully appreciating that push-pull that you described. I see it with a little bit more perspective now. I wanted to clarify that I had submitted my resignation from the startup in January, and my last day was July 31st. And then kind of right at the end, it lost funding and closed in August. So I was on my way out anyway. And it was just because of the pull, because of that need to make a profit, that made things feel like I wasn't doing the best for the patient. So yeah, I don't know how we do that differently. I think in the end, it had nothing to do with me, and it had all to do with the world of venture capital and what they're funding at a given time. But anyway, it was a great learning experience.
Yeah, well, you've had such a creative and interesting journey. As we sort of close here, are there maybe a point or two that you would communicate to our audience, especially those who are either feeling burnout or at different stages of their career, just something from your own path that might speak to folks that are listening?
I do, yes. And I've really thought about this a lot just recently. And one thing I think I would highly encourage everyone to do is to find a mentor or find more than one mentor. But that's something that was said to me, I think, but we did not have any structure in our department for mentorship. So my whole career, I've never had a mentor actually. And I think had I had a mentor in my department, they might have suggested some changes that I could make that may have kept me in the profession, you know? What if a mentor had said, Rachel, I see that you're an excellent teacher. You know, you've won this teaching award. Your students love you. It gives you huge satisfaction. What if we moved you to the resident teaching clinic? And I would have said, yeah, but I don't feel confident because I'm not good at procedures. And then they could have said, that's fine. We're going to take some days and have you shadow and make sure you learn those procedures before you go. They're going to take a month off to do it before you change practice. Like, if that was possible, if somebody had suggested it, I could have been going for another 20 years probably, you know? So that's where like a mentor who's really thoughtful and especially who's within your organization and maybe higher up who has a different viewpoint might be able to really help someone see possibilities that that I didn't see, for example.
Yeah, no, totally. There's a chapter in this other book. It's called Stress and Burnout in the Human Service Professions.
Oh, okay.
I mean, this is again from like 1980.
Okay.
But Ayala Pines worked with Christina Masloch in the original studies of burnout in the West Coast. She talks about the buffer of social support systems. And it speaks to exactly what you're saying, is that you need to have certain types of support as part of the social support in the workplace. And what do they look like? Well, one of them is technical support. So someone who's a peer or someone who knows as much as an expert in the field to help you with your own sense of proficiency, technically speaking, right? But you also need technical challenge, someone to push you, say, hey, look, you need to think about trying to do something better, or learn a new skill or something like that. Similarly, she says, you need to have emotional support. So someone who's a peer who can understand and provide you support, saying, irrespective of what happened, just to support you, right? But then also you need to have emotional challenge. You need to have someone saying, wait, could you have done more? Could you have, is that your best? And to kind of push you, but it's still having the trust. I mean, you still have trustworthiness as a feature of that person. But the point is that in the mentor, you get it all, right? You get someone who understands the technical stuff and can help you fine tune your own skills or add skills or whatever. But they also push you. And if you don't get pushed, then that also it actually detracts from the workplace fulfillment. And the argument's been made, burnout is driven by boredom. It's actually part of the equation.
And then also, just as what we talked about, which I think you said so nicely, just at the start of your career, take the time to think about what you bring to the table in terms of your skills and interests. What are your challenges in terms of your personality, and how you might reconcile those as time goes on, and also how you might build an off-ramp, not an off-ramp in terms, I don't mean off-ramp from the profession, but off-ramp meaning how can I develop the capacity to make a change in my career? Should I consider a fellowship, organized medicine, research, all that stuff? Yeah.
Right. Sage advice. I'll add to that folks who feel comfortable to do so could actually act as mentors themselves for other folks who are either younger. In fact, I just did that this morning. Someone called me with a question that was a pretty complex question, ethically speaking, from an ICU, and we talked through it. And it was helpful to me too to hear where he was at, and it allowed me to sort of process for my own experience for something like that in the future. The second thing is and I totally agree with what you're saying, is to know what you're bringing to the table, but also as you move through during the experience of life and career, as we go prospectively through that, to have this idea of self-compassion. I know that term is sort of bandied around a lot, and it can sound pretty squishy and fuzzy and touchy-feely and all that. But actually there's a lot of science behind it, but there's also a lot of meaning behind it. There's a book that I'm actually reading right now by Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer called The Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. And it goes through a number of different exercises that really just focus on what is this thing called self-compassion. It's sort of this confluence between mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity. And what does that look like in practical terms? And common humanity. And what does that look like in practical terms? They give a bunch of different exercises that you can use in the moment, wherever that is. And those are, I think, essential to have patience with ourselves as we move through this open-ended part of our careers where we don't really know what's coming next, right? Where as we're pivoting, we have to feel grounded and have that sense of agency and human connection that I emphasize in the health architect myth and archetype and all the rituals and practices that go along with that, what I've been talking about in the Substack. But that is all part and parcel of this movement through an experiential part of our lives, and not just doing it as a transactional thing to check the box and survive to tomorrow, right?
That book changed my life.
Oh, you read that too? Oh my God.
Yes. Oh my God. It really, I think I probably read it 5 years ago. And yeah, it totally changed my perspective about I'm like, you know what? I spend all day being truly compassionate towards other people and being like, I totally understand why, I like give them compassion where they can't. And I'm like, why am I not doing that for myself?
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I'm going through this thing and I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty good. It's not just some, hokey whatever thing.
No, it really is so good. And I've actually been reflecting on that just in the last week or two. I've been a little bit hard on myself. Like what could I have done to stay in medicine? Am I a failure? Et cetera. And then on the flip side, I'm realizing, like I said, people change continually throughout their lives. What's good for you at one time may not be for the other. And also, yes, regardless, self-compassion. I would never criticize another physician for leaving the profession.
Right.
Why would I do that to myself?
It's so true. I mean, the Thich Nhat Hanh calls it the second arrow. Have you heard this concept?
No, I haven't heard that. What's that?
So the idea is that there are two arrows. First is some event happens, right? Something bad happens, your loss of your career or your spouse or some hardship, right? But then the second arrow is what we do to ourselves. We feel the sense of guilt and shame and failure, and we just beat ourselves up. And that's the second arrow. It doesn't have to go in. And so he spends a lot of time saying, look, you don't have to put that second arrow in. That is a self-inflicted wound. And so I think that the Mindful Self-Compassion workbook sort of speaks to that, is we don't need to bludgeon ourselves. We can adapt and improve and grow and love, just ourselves just as much as anybody else. So that's.
I love that metaphor so much, and I had never heard it before.
Well, as our time comes to a close, thank you, Rachel, for sharing so much about your past and your present. And I can only hope that your future is going to be as fulfilling as I imagine it to be, whatever you choose to do next, both personally and professionally. So thanks for spending the time.
Thank you so much, Venkatesh. It was a pleasure.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed this post. In upcoming episodes, we'll return to some of the more practical elements of how to be a health architect, including a basic communication tool that we've heard about already, slowing down. See you soon.